보여주라.
네. 이거라고요? 최선물이?
두 분 다 좋아한단 말이에요. 이제 두 분 다 great.
95-year-old Mr. Peck proudly shows us his latest memento, a badge with Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, two North Korean leaders vilified as the epitome of evil in the West.
위하고 아주 가깝게 지난다. 위에 있고 아래 있고 아니고 together, always together with us.
But Mr. Peck doesn't live in Pyongyang. For decades, he has lived here in Tokyo, Japan, a country that has been hostile to Koreans since it occupied their land at the beginning of the 20th century, especially the 150,000 or so who identify with the DPRK. So how is it that new generations of Koreans born in Japan grow up loyal to the most demonized state in the West? Oh, nice. This is a song from the DPRK. Along with a few other relics Mr. Peck keeps, this is one of the ways he keeps up his connection to his homeland. That's awesome. So you always listen to this?
Every day.
Every day?
Every day.
Wow. Mr. Peck's life has not been easy here, and for younger Koreans, it's not getting easier. Japan is experiencing a resurgence of the extreme right, just like Europe and the US. All foreigners, known as gaijin in Japanese, are increasingly frowned upon, but it's Chosen Koreans, or those who identify with the DPRK, who are in the most danger.
日本人は朝鮮人を嫌う。でこれちなみに言っときますけれども、その産経新聞というね、その新聞メディアで世論調査した結果、韓国が嫌いだとはっきり答えた人が9割に上ってるんですよ。
Makoto Sakurai is a poster boy of the Japanese far right. Taking his cues from Donald Trump, Sakurai launched the Japan First Party in 2016 and quickly became infamous for his xenophobic views and his scapegoating of Japan's ethnic Korean minority.
例えば朝鮮半島に帰るであるとか祖国へ帰るであるとか、口にするのもおぞましいですけど、例えばゴキブリ朝鮮人であるとか、いい韓国人も悪い韓国人も殺せっていうような、発言が出ていること。
This is Kim. He's a 24-year-old student activist and part of Japan's North Korean community.
それ自体が、ある意味在日朝鮮人が本当に自分が堂々と生きたりとか名乗りづらかったりとか朝鮮人っていうところをやっぱり否定的に考えてしまうような、社会世論を本当に喚起しているような。
Modern Japanese racism is inextricably tied to when Japan was Asia's foremost imperial power until it was defeated alongside Nazi Germany at the end of World War II. Japan glorified its bloody colonization across the Asia-Pacific by demonizing its colonial subjects. And right up until today, Japanese society rarely talks about how during that time, hundreds of thousands of Koreans were forced to work in slave-like conditions in Japanese mines and factories as the country industrialized at breakneck speed. Or how when Japan was allied to Nazi Germany against the Allies in World War II, Korean men were conscripted in the army and sent to some of the harshest fronts where they faced probable death. Meanwhile, Japan imposed extreme assimilation policies on Koreans, forcing Japanese citizenship on them. They even had to change their names to Japanese ones, while their newspapers and schools were shut down. So kids were unable to learn Korean, but they were taught anthems of Nazi Germany in Japanese schools, which Mr. Peck still remembers.
Die Fahne hoch, die Reihen geschlossen, es war marschiert, at front, RC, SR, you know, SR. 학생들 유행하고 있었어요. Popular.
Popular? When the Japanese Empire fell in 1945, most Koreans returned home, but approximately 600,000 stayed in Japan. The government then stripped ethnic Koreans of the Japanese citizenship that had been forced on them. And years later, when they'd be allowed to get it back, many refused, even though it would mean more political rights and freedom to travel.
I've never visited DPRK. I visited South Korea, but I don't consider South Korea my home or homeland. That's definitely where my ancestors came from. That's the country where my grandma and grandpa grew up. But I feel still that Japan is the bigger part of me in terms of country. And yet, I don't want to be naturalized. I don't want to be invisible. And I feel like being a Korean with a special permanent residency, I feel like I'm a living evidence of Japan's colonial past.
Koreans who identify with North Korea refer to themselves as Chosen Koreans. They make up roughly a quarter of the total Korean population living here. Mr. Koo runs a gaming parlor known as a pachinko. Pachinkos became the economic bedrock of the Chosen community.
でなったんですけども、なんでこんなにこの在日コリアンがこのパチンコの仕事をしている人が多いかというと、戦後間もなく僕らが企業に就職したりできなかったんですね。そういうあまり日本の人がやりたがらない仕事しかなかったからパチンコとそういうホルモンの焼肉の仕事を始めて、で今
Today, Chosen Koreans' pachinko and restaurant businesses are thriving here, and their profits are major contributors to an organization called the Cheongryun. Founded over 60 years ago, the Cheongryun remains one of two bodies that represents Koreans in Japan. Tied to the DPRK, it has fought for decades to protect Korean culture and language, a difficult task in a country as ethnocentric as Japan. The DPRK has historically funded the community and its network of schools. And people here have not forgotten that, which partly explains why political support for Pyongyang remains strong in the community. But that doesn't necessarily mean absolute loyalty to the DPRK for everyone. For some, it's about something much more simple, a stateless people maintaining their identity in the face of adversity.
日本の国が何もしなくてくれた権利はないです。自分らで戦って勝ち取って署名して直接お伺いとか意見を言うところに言って、でやっと獲得した権利が1つ2つっていう、そういう、戦いの歴史ですね。結局こういうふうにしようという、指令をしてくれるのが、チョンリョンであり。
Mr. Kang is also a member of the Cheongryun. His family have been in the restaurant business, which support the organization financially, for 3 generations.
ここは50年ぐらい前におばあちゃん自体はもっと前からこっち日本に渡ってきて、このホッピー通りはもうほとんどが在日の人たちが仕事をしてます。で今はもう2世3世の人たちがお店を継いでやってるんですけども、お店です。でここも先輩のお店だし、でこちらが僕が働いてるお店になって、一番大きなお店になってます。はい、よかったら中見てみますか。はい。ラナもう一回キッチンに入るっつって、ラナもう一回キッチンに入るよってそのまま撮影したまんま。
The Cheongryun run around 70 schools which aim to keep Korean children connected to their language and community. They're especially valued because they offer an alternative to Japanese schools, which teach a glorified version of the history which is so painful for Koreans.
나치스에 추종하던 사람들에 대해서 재판을 하고 비판했습니다. 사회적으로 비판했습니다. 일본 그거 없습니다.
When I was growing up, I never heard that Japan was actually a perpetrator country too. They feel like they are being personally attacked for the things that happened years before they were even born.
反日教育はしてないです。国主義っていう考え方自体、違う国を侵略してそこを自分の国にしていくっていう、に関しては大反対するっていう、立場ですね。僕ら朝鮮学校出身者はそうですね、帝国主義嫌い、大嫌い。
The scene might look like the stereotype we constantly see in the West, brainwashed North Koreans who blindly worship the DPRK and its leaders. But that's not really what I found. I was actually surprised at how much nuance there is amongst Joseon Koreans in their views towards their homeland.
The students are very critical. They actually are exposed to multiple news sources. Like they don't only watch Japanese news, but they also watch South Korean news, and they also hear what North Korean government is saying about particular issues, and they think very deeply what is true, or how truth is kind of fabricated or created by the media. So I think I would definitely say that they are actually existing at the very opposite of being brainwashed.
일본 신문이랑은 일본 마스코미는 우리를 갖다가 개인 숭배, 우상화, 뭐 별의별 말을 다 하지만은 우리는 그게 생각하지 않습니다. 아주 가까운 친근한 분으로 봅니다. 우리가 자기 자질에서 그걸 존경하고 있고 받들고 있는 것이 누가 김성원수를 존경하지 않으면 너 안 된다. 강요사는 없지 않습니까? 이게 남조선이 뭐 경제적으로 발전했다 하지만 남조선 정부는 한 푼도 돈 버는 바가 없습니다. 책 한 권 버는 바가 없다면, 노트북 하나 버는 바가 없다면.
The Cheonggyeon community goes to great lengths to keep its connection to Korea alive. Here in this museum, a vast range of rock, plant, and even animal specimens that the organization has collected from the DPRK are on display. It may seem a bit weird, but this community love it. It's one of the many ways they maintain familiarity with a country that embraces them as they are, while their Japanese home and its society treats them as outcasts.
저의 고향 홈타운은 이 춘천남도이고
나도 춘천부터 남쪽에 있습니다.
저는 경상북도 고향.
But the Japanese government doesn't always take kindly to mementos brought in from the DPRK. So yesterday, students from a Korean school returned from Pyongyang to Tokyo. Their souvenirs were confiscated at the airport, and Cheonggyeon officials gave us a call today. They want us to attend a press conference, so we're about to go in and find out what's going on.
でこの蛮行が日本政府の指示によるものであるのは明らかなので、苦しめるという行為がこれは国際的にも犯罪行為に近いと思います。
Japan's authorities are also facing Cheonggyeon students and teachers in court over discrimination. Their schools are the only ones nationwide that are excluded from state subsidies, forcing parents to pay high tuition fees. And on the way to school, pupils have to reckon with the threat of violent far-right groups.
で一部やっぱり学校の方にも抗議電話というかもう帰れとかもう日本が嫌だったら朝鮮帰れとかそういったのも多いです。
Pupils are too afraid to even wear their traditional Korean uniforms, called the chigori, to school. Here they are wearing Japanese uniform, and here, now they are safely through the school gates, they've changed into their chigoris.
옛날은 저고리로 우리 학교에 다니고 있었지만 지금은 이렇게 청소도 긴장하는 속에서 저고리로 다니지 못하게 되는 것이 참 가슴 아픈 일이라고 생각합니다.
Dr. Kyung says it's exactly this atmosphere, which makes Koreans feel like they have to hide their identity, that provokes those born in Japan to cling onto their roots even more firmly.
If you talk about headscarf, and in France, for example, when anti-Muslim violence escalated, the number of people who wore scarf rose. When you face discrimination because of who you are, I think you inevitably feel that you need to protect, who you are.
朝鮮学校出身者はやっぱそういうところは打たれ強いというか、何かやられてもそこでもうダメだってなるんじゃなくて、この反発と戦っていくっていう、そういう風に育つ子が多いと思います。
And so even those ethnic Koreans who have naturalized as Japanese citizens and are objectively much more Japanese than Korean, the louder anti-Korean voices get, the closer the Cheonggyeon community comes together.
A lot of people have already naturalized as Japanese citizens, and they are full members of the society in a political sense. They have a vote, they can vote. And many community members of Cheonggyeon do not choose that route. intentionally. They have already learned from other people's struggles, like civil rights movement in the United States, that the citizenship by itself would not guarantee you to participate in the society fully.
In the West, citizenship doesn't mean much if you're black, Muslim, Jewish, Roma, or a member of some other minority, which is the punchbag of the day or era. It's the same for Koreans in Japan. The desire to simply be treated as a human being and not some other label like resident, citizen, immigrant, asylum seeker, displaced person, and so on. That's not to say the political rights that each generation of Koreans in Japan have fought so hard for don't mean something. This is why they're so determined to keep the memory of that struggle alive, through their Chongryon and through their schools, so that future generations can avoid repeating the worst horrors their ancestors lived through, not least war, a specter which continues to linger over the Korean peninsula.
조선 사람이 바라는 것이 두 가지 있습니다. 하나는 절대로 두 번 다시 식민지 노예살해를 안 한다. 일제시기 같은 그런 식민지 생활은 안 한다. 바라지 않는다. 두 번째는 전쟁을 하면 안 된다. 이 두 가지는 북이건 남이건 돈 있는 사람이건 돈 없는 사람이건 이건 절대로